Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Elder Empire, see Book 3 of Kings and Killers. Sorry, I was about to do the other one. Chapters 20, 21, and 22. In these chapters, Calder decides he is going to take some real risks dipping into the Emperor's powers, and if he had not been basically reanimated, it probably would not have gone super well for him. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Asher for commissioning this episode. So, this one is, this trio of chapters has several things that I was really looking forward to seeing. First of all, Calder realizing that nobody got his messages. Second of all, the general vibe between him and Shara and the way that they seem to they hate each other, but they also really do understand each other because they, in many ways, are on the same page, even though they don't really seem to get that. But most of all, we get Bliss taking out Nathaniel, and I swear to God, it was like, it happened almost too fast for me to enjoy. I read this section twice, so I was able to savor it a little bit more in the second one. But I'm so happy because y'all know the fact that he managed to get away. I was just like, what? Really? And I guess they knew that was going to be how it was. So I was over here assuming that they fucked up, that excuse me, that the consultants just didn't fully appreciate the extent to which Nathaniel Barrius had armed himself and prepared for an assassination attempt. And I guess when I stop and really think about it, they had his right-hand guy as one of their own people for so long that it makes a lot more sense that his right-hand guy would know most of these contingency plans and tell them, so that they could prepare for it. I would be willing to accept if he didn't even tell his right-hand guy about a lot of the things because he wants to just keep everything super secret. But really, Nathaniel felt like the kind of guy who would need to tell at least one person because he's so arrogant and so pleased with himself that I think he would want to show off just a little. And it just feels right for his personality that there is one soul who would know pretty much everything. So I'm over here viewing the consultants as just failing a mission. And you guys heard me say that I was hoping Bliss would be able to take care of him in this book, but I was thinking that it would be a surprise moment for her stumbling across him somehow in the midst of another situation. I did not think that the consultants were going to be so utterly prepared for what he was going to do that they would be able to basically direct her to the exact spot to give her this kill. I mean, just never occurred to me, not even one time. And what I love about this is all of his contingency plans are about death. But she doesn't exactly kill him, does she? So I have to assume nothing that he's got in his little arsenal is going to do shit for this situation. And I love that at one point in the first of these 3 chapters, she mentions how she would love to turn him into a handbag, and is that allowed? And then that's exactly what she decides to do, is to use him as a handbag. Turning your enemies into handbags. Truly unparalleled. What a statement. I love this. Bliss is just so delightful. So scary. But scary in a way that like a really adorable, fluffy wild animal is scary. Where you're just like, oh yeah, I know that it's like super dangerous and I shouldn't pet it and I won't, but I really want to pet it. Like, look at it, you know? So I just had to talk about that off the top because, like I said, it's a really quick scene. It moves so fast, and I prefer it to move fast in some ways because I don't need her to monologue. I don't need there to be this big, like, production where she chases him around the ship or God knows what. That's fine. But I had barely sort of begun to realize, like, oh, that's what happened. And I have to imagine if you read this book first, and I feel like, Asher, did you read the Sea books before the what are the other ones called? Shadow books, I guess? Because I have to think that if you are going into the Shadow books second, the assassination attempt on Nathaniel would feel really confusing. You know, it would just be kind of like, wait, hold on. Wait, what? So either way, the Nathaniel Barrios scenes in both books are each going to feel like a surprise. And that is a hard thing to pull off. So, Asher says no red Shara's first. Okay, like me. All right, so we're going to back this up a little bit. And chapter 20 starts with Calder, and he is, this is him standing at the spot where the Emperor's head of his statue is, and realizing that Urg'naut is beginning to take everything over. The shadow is creeping in. And this is when Andel's white sun, which he has soulbound to now, lights up. And in response to this, the first thing that Calder says, because Andel is still acting like, oh, you're just going to go ahead with it anyway, right? And Urg'naut is like, you know, he is kind of elder that even the sleepless don't fuck with. He is too much for them. So I felt like it was very valid for Calder to be like, no, bud, it's too late. He's out there. I am not doing that. And even Foster comes forward and is like, yeah, no. As a reader, the very first thing you're taught, do not read the fucking elders. Don't do it. And then Calder is sitting there, and what Andel said was, say what you want about the Emperor, but he did everything to protect people from the elders. Foster says, and even he stopped using this thing. And I could not believe that Calder follows up with, yeah, I'm going to do it. Honestly, the first line before he says I'm going in is, but that didn't mean Calder had to be stupid about it. And I'm like, right, by not using it, right? I felt like Padme in that meme with what's his face, and he's like, I'm not going to be stupid about it. I'm like, so you're not using it, right? You're not using it, right? No, all he means is I'm going to use it, but like in a different way. I'm not going to read the Elder because I can't, like, that's not going to help. I won't be able to handle it. I'm just going to do something else. And all I could think was, he's going to know you're there though, right? Like, this just made me so nervous right out of the gate. It really, I didn't like it. I didn't. And the way it goes, he is very lucky. I'll just say that. So what he decides he's going to do is amplify the white sun at Hightower and any other protections I can find in the capital. I actually really liked this. I thought this was like a cool idea once I saw it in action. And basically, we find out about all of these little like charms and things that people have made around the city that they have tried to infuse with their intent to protect themselves or their homes or their children from elder influence. And they all have enough intent to like have some vague effect, but not enough to actually protect them. It's enough that an elder would kind of be like, ew, what's that smell? If they came into the house, but not enough to stop them or anything. So what he does is he gets in touch with every one of these little talismans and amps it up. And I don't know why, but I fucking love this. Like, there are so many things that are used in this way across the world in different, like, religions and belief systems, but also not even. Also, people who are not religious in any way, maybe not even spiritual, but they think that something is still sort of lucky, protective in a way. In a way that's not necessarily like bound to any idea of like a higher power necessarily, just more of a vague superstition. And the concept of somebody being able to just like go in and use a intent that they have centralized in one spot to infuse all of those objects and make them a little bit more of what they were intended to be. I don't know. I just think that's neat. Like, I think about things like my mother had one of those medallions, and I can't remember, is it St. Michael? That is the guardian for travel. But she had one of those like hanging from her rearview mirror for a little while. Things like that, wouldn't it be nice if we could just like actually know our shit was helping in some way? I love the idea of it even working on stuff like pacifiers, shit that's like really important to kids, that they're like, I am absolutely not going to the fucking movies without this thing. I am bringing my blankie. Thank you. That's the end of that conversation. And now the blankie is like magical. I love it. Let's do it. So he feels at this point Lauralee nearby, and he has to like sort of set that aside while he's doing this work, but he comes back to it. And I really also enjoy the moment where he's connecting with the high tower and the jewel that's atop it. Apparently, Lauralee had tried to awaken it, and she didn't even succeed at doing that, which I think is wild. And I would kind of like to know why not. Like, I don't think we'll ever find out why not, but it seems like it would be absolutely ripe for a power like hers. Why wouldn't that work? Anyway, he uses that to like connect to things, and the light from it is directed to protect and illuminate and bring peace. And that is the power that he is investing in all of these other objects. And then we find out about 7 giant spikes of iron under the city. Calder was reminded immediately of the nails carried by the watchmen, but these were thousands of times larger and thousands of times more powerful. They were all awakened, so he couldn't add to their power, but he found himself surprised that Urg'naut could even approach the capital. The spikes were not intended to destroy lesser elder spawn, but were aimed straight at the great elders themselves. While Urg'naut was here, perhaps he could be defeated without the great sacrifices the battle against him had taken in the past, which brought Calder's attention to the second major thing he'd noticed in the capital: Joran Cursebreaker. And I love this description of this guy. Basically, he's hovering in the air. He is like just fucking going for it, breathing hard, almost gasping, and like still relentless. And Calder is like, look, this man has fucked my life up. We have not gotten along, but damn, I cannot help it. This is just badass and good for you, man. And I really am going to do my best to help your ass out. A vague light A hint of heat, like a warm breeze, began to press against Urg'naut. Encouraged, he pushed on. Then, like tripping on flat ground, he stumbled across something much more powerful. An awakened weapon that hungered after Urg'naut. A weapon he recognized. A green dagger. And this is like a moment where I really want to stop and go back to the other book. And I'm not doing that this read through because I'm a little worried about like weirdly seeing something in the reread in conjunction with whatever I'm reading in the book I'm covering at the moment that might lead to like me putting pieces together I wouldn't otherwise. So I'm not going back. But this moment where he is sort of zeroing in on Shara, I am wondering whether when we're reading from her perspective in this moment, if she feels it, does she have a sense that something has its eye on her in this moment or not? Like, I can't tell how perceptible he is. So yeah, and she is going like after the shadow herself, and it says it was only at this point he realized there were other gardeners around, and their presence was incomparable to anything he'd felt before. He recognized Maya, the woman with the intent of a dozen chimera packed inside her body. And he can sense that she is soulbound, and he's kind of like, I don't love that the consultants have like another really powerful person, but I do like her, and then like, I guess good for her. And I was like, I'm glad you haven't examined everybody else to see just how many soulbound there are, sir, because you're going to be a lot less comfortable in a second. And this is when he's like considering taking Shara down, and all of a sudden he feels Urg'naut's attention focus, and I thought Urg'naut was looking at him, but no, this is the part where Urg'naut is looking at I can't remember his name. I'm going to probably come across it in a second. But this dude that I was really sad that he apparently just dies because I liked him and we had already lost Lucan, and I sort of thought that this guy was going to wind up like serving as a replacement for Lucan, even though I know that's really not how Will White tends to work. Darius, thank you guys. Darius Albright. Okay, thank you. So that is what Calder is feeling, is Urg'naut deciding to enter this guy's body. And as we know, Darius agrees to do it. And it doesn't really go the way that we know Calder is assuming, because Urg'naut is the one that tells Shara about the situation of taking over human bodies and that they are vulnerable once they are in a human body. It's just, I mean, there is no way to find out that he is taking a human body, which is exactly the thing we're all trying to simultaneously. We would like to have them do it because it makes them more vulnerable, but it's also like one step away from them ruining everything to the point that then Osriel has to end the world. So mixed feelings, I am sure. As though he was reading his own memory, he saw Geraldus Teach touching Roderick Martin. The Emperor would not have let a rebel live. His intent from his armor and his crown, both of which Calder carried on his person, agreed. Anyone who defied the Emperor was defying the Empire, civilization, humanity itself. They were traitors who deserved no mercy. He released his grip on Shara and flew back through the capital. So this like whole moment here is him again stopping and going, oh, this is what the Emperor would do, so I'm not gonna. And I think that's like one of those rules of thumb that's a little bit too simplistic, probably, but I can understand why he feels this way. I think it's very obvious. Calder has a point, you know, as we've seen all of these different stories about the way that the Emperor handled certain things. he had lost touch with his humanity. There's no way to live that long and do the things that he can do and still be connected to being a regular person. It's just not possible. It's like to me, it's like the same concept as becoming super rich. Remembering what it was like to genuinely not be able to make ends meet. Whatever you did, you just always were behind, were scrambling. That feeling of constant fear, instability is so easy to leave behind. And putting yourself in the position of remembering, especially if you've gotten to a point where you are so insanely successful, it's not easy to like take it on. Oh my God, my cat is in this room, you guys. My cat just scared the shit out of me. I didn't even know she was in here. I'm like talking about this and hearing this weird sound. I don't know if y'all heard it. Oh, she just about gave me a heart attack. Well, I'll just have to hope she doesn't pee on anything while she's in here because it's the bad cat. But what I was saying is the very fact that you managed to become successful can sometimes make you feel like, well, if I did it, anybody can do it, kind of thing. And I think that the emperor was really doing his best. I genuinely do. I think he meant everything to be in the interest of humanity at large, but he was just so big picture that it completely lost perspective for him. So this is when he turns his focus back to Urg'naut. And we get this interesting like setup where it says he turned his focus back to Urg'naut, comma, the new paragraph, creeping, new paragraph, shadow, new paragraph, all is darkness, indent. There is only the void. Existence is suffering. Death is mercy. New paragraph. And I'm like, oh no. And honestly, existence is suffering, death is mercy is a little bit too much like how I feel lately. And I was just not loving seeing a mentality that I have dancing around in my brain being like represented by a fucking gray elder. And trying to imagine depression as a gray elder is sort of weirdly helpful. Just being like, oh, you'd like it if I did that, wouldn't you? Well, fuck you. Like just this general sense of defiance. Helpful. I think I'll try and employ that. But it turns out, yeah, he has read an elder and it almost completely like flattens him. And when he comes back to himself, he can hear Foster and Andal talking about him and the fact that some people don't ever really recover from this. And even though he can hear them, it's this very vague sense. He's not like connected to it. And it says their words were just noise that could attract the great elder. His thoughts dashed away from him, handfuls of stars cast into the endless void beyond the world. His mind sought anything that could relieve the darkness. He still wore the Emperor's armor. The crown was tucked away inside. The Emperor's intent had pressed in on him for so long now that he had grown used to resisting it as a matter of habit. He longed to read something, to open himself to existence, but he still hesitated. He was afraid of the Emperor's intent. Giving in to it meant submerging himself in a man he hated. But on the other hand, so he opens himself up to it. And we find out that the Emperor made his armor white, sort of in honor of the Abaddon. To him, white is the color of protection. And we then see some of his memories. I am the first reader. The Guild of Magisters has no authority over my teachings. The hordes of Othagor pass over him like waves, claws that can rend iron and pierce minds scratching at his armor. Bound by his intent, the white steel remains strong. He strides through unharmed. And there's just, several memories like this in a row. And it ends with, he does not intend to be erased, for he is the emperor, and his will is law. And Calder snaps back into himself, and he opens his eyes, and everything feels fucking off still. Everything is just sort of generally, all right, am I in my body? This feels not quite familiar, actually. And it turns out, as we go along further with this, that he is pretty much buried inside the Emperor's intent right now. And it's like a finite resource that begins to run out as he uses it up. But for now, he is really tapping into something beyond himself. And we have a couple of things that he just reads or invests with no effort. First, there's a single match that he is like, give me light. And the shit just explodes into this huge flame. And everybody is like, yo, what's going on? And he stands up and walks away and just says, follow. He does not even say, hey guys, follow me. Hey, I'm fine. None of that. It's just follow. Like, it just doesn't feel like Calder, So, let's see, here it is. The helmet is in his fingers, and they come out into this like strange dark world. When the tendrils of Urg'naut touched him, they flinched back. As they descended from the ruins, he saw the testament in the dull light. A chunk of wall leaned precariously over the entrance to the harbor. That could not be allowed. It would threaten the ship as they left. Calder reached his intent down into the ground, investing the cliff. Do not let go. The entire island shook as earth moved out from the cliffside like fingers, gripping the slabs of stone tightly. Grass grew among the rocks, binding themselves together. The wall was lifted up slightly, and the ground echoed its resolve to maintain its hold. He braced himself for reader burn. He had never used active reading before, but he was sure it would exhaust him. It was surprisingly easy. Why couldn't everyone do this? No, he had invented active reading. It was easy because he had centuries of practice. Reader burn? He hadn't experienced such a weakness since he was practically a child. Reader burn occurred when one's ability as a reader outpaced one's constitution. With its recent alchemical enhancements, this body was sturdy enough. So active reading is the ongoing command of matter, right? Like, basically, this is authority in the other series in Cradle, because I just keep thinking of Northstrider just saying hold as he goes into his decaying pocket world. And the idea that it's not your ability to read that is necessarily the problem that causes reader burn. Your ability has to match what your body is capable of. And I never really thought of it as even being something particularly connected to your body, even though it's a physical pain. And so I should put that together. But it's a physical pain that manifests as like a headache. So it still felt sort of, well, it might not be pain the way I'm thinking pain manifests, that's something that's actually physiologically happening. Maybe reader burn headaches are a different kind of almost spiritual pain, but finding out that no, your body being reinforced like a champion's makes it easier for you to do this is really interesting. I didn't really think that would be connected. So, the Great Elder sensed Calder's attention and the empty face turned toward him. Calder focused on Joran, communicating a simple message with his intent. Hold on. And I love this. Joran, like, all right. And Urg'naut says, you were gone. And then you became nothing. But they were not thorough. Pieces of you remain. I am sorry I did not correct this mistake sooner. I am sorry, but Urg'naut is like, I really enjoy him. He is so scary, for sure. But his whole like, oh man, you should have been put out of your misery this sucks for you. Man, I'm really sorry. I didn't know that there were still like splinters in your finger. You should have said something. I could have gotten those out. Well, don't worry. I'll take care of it right now. Come here. Like, there's just such a sense from Urg'naut of like, I'm just trying to help, bruh. Like, you don't get it, but that's not my problem. Trust. I am. And I really get it. It's just not actually helpful, but I get it. So, be gone from my empire. And he raised his hand to match the creeping shadows. For the first time since the Elder War, the full power of a great elder lashed out into reality. Everything between Urg'naut's palm and Calder's ceased to exist. And I was just like, good God, that, again, this sucks. So many people die. Thousands of people. And it's like just a giant hand just reached down and scooped everything out. There's a trench in the ground. Even the water is like great. It's like Red Seaing it for a second, where there's like two walls that just chill for a moment. The entire half of the island in front of Calder was gone. He now stood on a cliff. And the Great Elder's intent crashed into his hand like a rampaging bull slamming into a single solid post. And he manages to hold it back. And there is this moment where Calder's realizing that the Emperor's power is beginning to drain away from him a little bit, and he's starting to freak out. He is starting to really feel the fear and is asking himself basically, what the fuck am I doing? I can't believe I'm trying to go up against a Great Elder. I cannot handle this. And he talks himself down into, you know what? Urg'naut isn't going to scare me to death, so I may as well just put my all into it instead of like panicking like a little bitch. And he's thinking about Laurelie, and there's a moment where he quotes her saying, when all is lost is the worst time to give up, because that's when you have nothing to lose. And I really do like that line. Some lines like that can feel really trite and like sort of, you know, just a little glib, like, okay, but what does that even really mean? And this is one where I'm like, no, actually, that kind of works when you're just like, well, then why not try something? If it goes wrong, you're fucked anyway. So, I mean, what excuse are you going to come up with now? If you're giving up, just admit that it's you giving up and not the world defeating you, because those are two different things. So he has to slap himself in the face to kind of recover. And I love that Shuffles comes up and also slaps him. So he begins to run, and it says he quickly realized he hadn't run flat out since Petal had enhanced his body. And he's just like, God damn, I can go really fast. This is dope. Despair gripped his heart as he looked up at the Tower of Shadow reaching into the sky. He couldn't see a thing. like everyone else for miles, Calder was reduced to standing and staring as Urg'naut turned all his attention against the ceiling of the world. And all of these cracks begin to continue to spider out. And he feels the sky beginning to crack even further. And he is seeing the void beyond and what's in the void. And I keep forgetting that the void is not the same thing as the space that the Abaddon are in. When they are in space, that is the way. The void is its own thing, which the Mad King is like thinking to toss Azrael into in the other series. So it's just two distinctly different sort of dimensions, I guess you would call them. And the void has some wild shit going on. I am not going to go into all of the description, but it does not sound like a place that I would really enjoy. I would watch it on a TV screen, but please do not send me there. Thank you. It's like going too deep underwater. No, I'll watch your footage and thank you for doing that. I am not interested. So I'm going to have to speed things up here because I'm really like bogged down in this whole moment for him. But it's just really nice to see Calder like embracing this power, even as he understands that he doesn't want to be this guy, and actually like really affecting some things, because it seems so often like he wants the spirit is willing, but the reaction of others is weak. And I just really liked this for him, that he is like managing some shit here. So he has to stop the Leviathan, who is essentially running away with the Testament. And I understand it's thinking to itself, oh, the world's over. This shit's done. It's canceled. And none of my bargains mean anything anymore because the world's ending, so who cares? And he has to go and like to drive a sword into its shoulder and be like, bud, we're still here. Humanity is still here. You still owe me and belong to me. And it is so resentful of the fact that he is right, because it can tell that he is right. And he says, shall we renegotiate? The Great One allows no one to steal from him. You're not his anymore, he said. You're mine. So that explains why when Laura Lee gets picked up by Calder's ship, it's being pulled by the Leviathan in the way that it is. And because you guys remember, I was just like, what the fuck? He can barely get it to do anything and it's out here just like going all out? How? So let me go into chapter 22. He is with Laura Lee, running to the Imperial Palace. The city is a fucking disaster. People are looting. Everything is just like out of control. And her intent to calm and soothe is having quite an effect on people. But, I have to assume that to a degree that's going to be temporary. And it's just mostly useful right now to help them get through to the actual palace, because everybody is in such a heightened state, that getting through the press of people, just practically speaking, would be really hard. And then getting through the guards would also be like probably impossible. So this is when she does a crack wholly unlike thunder shook the air, along with a flash more alien than lightning. Calder thought the effect might undermine her words, but the crowd began to filter away as though they had been controlled by the Emperor's crown. So I really wish that I could like picture what that crack and not lightning looked like, but I really can't imagine. So he runs through with her just barely ahead of him, and he keeps thinking, I'll catch up with her. I'll catch up with her. He does not catch up with her. Reader, he doesn't. And as they are passing this building, he stops her and is like, look, I know shit is really urgent, but there is somebody in there who needs you. and she can immediately tell that it's Gerald's Teach, and that she was injured by Joran's blade. She recognizes that type of injury and is just like, what happened when I left? And Calder's like, long story short, it didn't go awesome. And I know that we all have our problems and that we're not really like technically on the same side, but honestly, fuck that right now. We need each other. Help. And we find out about the way this transformation happened. She has a bone reaver heart. And what Laura Lee says is, the original purpose of the heart is to strengthen her body against Tearfang's intrusive intent. When Joran struck her with a much greater amount of similar intent, but failed to kill her, the heart overreacted, transforming her to increase the compatibility between her chimera graft and the rest of her. Which is that's actually an explanation that makes sense to me. Sometimes the explanations for things like this, I'm just like, I accept this, but I don't really get it. But this is one where I'm like, oh, okay, I see. And she says, I can remove the hostile power and she'll wake up, but she might not be herself anymore. And she also might even be a liability. And Calder realizes what she's saying is essentially, if I can't get her to play ball and cooperate, I'm going to have to kill her. I don't So they wake her up and she responds with like growling, crouching, and generally treating both of them like they are threats, like she is an animal, and like she doesn't really even understand human speech to a degree. But then Calder, he comes up and he wraps his fingers around the hilt. The Regent's fingers wrapped around the hilt of her sword. Sorry, I was saying Calder's wrapping his fingers, but no, he's watching her wrap her fingers around the hilt of her sword because he's like, oh, she's really going to kill her in a second. I really need to do something. So he steps forward and says, I need your help. The Empire needs you. And then he says, don't let the Emperor down. And that's what stops her. And it's unclear for him if it's that or if Laura Lee has been healing her this whole time and it just finally reached a threshold coincidentally with when he says this. I think it's obviously that phrase. If there is anything Teach believed in, it was the Emperor, as we know. So he says he entrusted the world to us and we're failing him. Please help us stop the elders before the Empire falls apart. And her tension goes out of her and she like falls down to her knees and starts to ask, how long was I out? And then she hears the like commotion outside and she's like, okay, never mind. Shit's happening. So then yells for the guards and for her armor. And Laura Lee is like, really glad to have you back. And Calder tells her, thanks for saving my life. And she says, try to be worth it. Which, that is some pressure. Let me tell you. Somebody saved my life and then told me try to be worth it. Oh, man. I mean, yikes. So, let's see. Joran was indeed waiting for them in the Emperor's throne room. The Regent wasn't visibly injured. He stood at the foot of the throne. Cheska Bennett had her red hair tied back in a bandana, and she wore clothes that looked like they'd been stolen from the poorest deckhand in the guild. Her other eye was covered by a ragged black eye patch. Had she been injured or lost it? I can't remember what happened to Cheska. If anybody wants to fill me in, because I don't recall how that went, but I feel like it was Shara. I don't remember how it happened, though. And then, of course, we've got Bliss and we have Nathaniel Barrius. Shara was missing. So was Laura Lee. And I love that Joran is basically like, look, I'm not going to lie and say, oh, I'm glad you're safe because, like, kind of fuck you. But if Laura Lee left you alive, I'm going to trust her judgment and assume like you're still good for something. And Cheska says, I don't stay at the table after I've already lost. It is only out of great respect for you that I have not turned Nathaniel Barrius into a handbag. Do you think he'll be useful to us? More so than a handbag, Jordan said wearily. Very well, then I will wait. I just love this energy. She said, wait. She's not like, all right, I won't do it. She's just like, I'll do it later. I'll do it later, which is what she does. Asher says, I feel like it happened when her ship went down, but I don't remember for sure. Yeah, I don't either. Okay. So, let's see. Shara. Okay, here is Shara. She turns up and she has walked in with Esther 6, which earlier Calder was thinking to himself, oh God, thank God Esther's not alive. And I was like, oh boy. And Esther basically has the same reaction she had last time, which is to grip up Calder and be like, I am going to kill him. And Laura Lee has to step in and vouch for him and be like, look, I get that he has ties to Kellerak, but he isn't controlled by him. I read him. I read his ship. I read his crew. I read his possessions. He isn't controlled by him. And Esther says something like, we've been fooled before. And I was sort of like, what does that mean? Like, how were you fooled before? I want to know more about that. And also, like, again, so many people have had to make deals with Kellerak. Why is it that she's taking particular, we had the whole conversation. Is it just that Kellerak didn't brand them? Or just that she just doesn't know about it? Like, does Esther not realize how many people deal with Kellerak? Is that what it comes down to? It feels like she just doesn't quite appreciate how common this is. But anyway, she manages to like talk Esther down, but it takes a while. And in that whole situation, Calder is panicking that he is going to choke to death. He's also clearly aware that Shara's like, we should just kill him. And let's see, we know their objective. They can't possess just anyone. And this is when Calder says, when they're in human form, we can strike them down for good. And when they don't act surprised, he initially takes this as evidence that they got his messages. But then when they ask, how do you know that? He's like, wait, what? And he realizes that not a single solitary one of them got the message. And he is like, man, I really thought at least one had gotten through. God damn it. So we have this moment where Esther says, we corner Kellerak and keep a tight grip on his host body. And everybody is looking at Calder, which makes sense, but we know that Kellerak had already tried to get Calder to be his host, and that didn't work. So the likelihood of Kellerak attempting it twice is pretty low. It makes sense that they would all assume it's going to be Calder, but, being in this perspective, we know that's already been tried. So I don't think that Jerry has even remotely entered his head at this point, because he believes her to still be locked up. But guess what? So they are thinking about who the other elders are going to want. And I really appreciate Bliss being like, look, we all know Tharlos is going to want me. Like, if there's anybody better suited, I will be very surprised. This is when Shara is like, we should kill him just in case. I wanted Calder to speak up and say, he already asked me, and I said no. Because he just never mentions this, and they're over here arguing about whether to just kill him outright, and you would think he would say something. And look, I get that probably they wouldn't believe him, but just make the attempt. But anyway, Cheska takes issue with that, but I've pretty much talked about this little conversation in the other book. So, let's see. This is Laura Lee. With a coordinated, unified assault, I believe we could defeat any Great Elder alone in their current state. And all of a sudden, Calder is realizing none of them really understand what the real stakes are here, because they don't have the information that was given to him by Osriel. So, taking the human hosts is a way for them to take the elders down. But you guys remember that when I first found out, oh, the elders want to escape this world, it's not their world, I was like, well, then just let them go. Just go. So he has to say, essentially, that if you think the dude that we saw in the sky is going to help us, I would not count on that. And this is when Shara immediately is like, oh, they're going to put us down. And he's like, yeah, if they get out, that's it. And Bliss says, well, Urg'naut already made it out. Does that mean it's too late? Did Urg'naut make it out? Or is that... Wait a minute. No. Wait, hold on. No. Is Darius out there still? I thought he didn't make it out. I thought he started to go up and then Osriel struck him down. I don't remember how this goes. I had a moment of thinking Darius and Daruman the Mad King were the same guy, but they are not the same guy, because Daruman is an executor for thousands of years before he bonds with one of the fiends. So I really had a moment there though, guys. Let's see. He tells Shara to stay near him, and she understands exactly what he's saying, that the next time Kellerak tries to make a deal with him, he's going to accept, and then she can kill him. I, again, appreciate so much that despite them being on totally different sides of this thing with very different perspectives on it all, she still knows exactly what the fuck he means. Immediately, there is just, if only they could work together more and understand. I feel like she could be a pretty good member of his team, And I suppose if he stays emperor and she becomes a regent, she sort of is, but it's not really what I meant. So let's see. They all begin to prep using the ships, because they were talking earlier about how fighting with fighting with Kellerak destroyed a chain of islands, so they need to get this as far away from the capital as they possibly can. And let's see, she had insisted on riding to battle in the Testament. The rest of the Black Watch had tried talking her into sailing with them, but she had remained firm. This is Cheska. Only also Greyweather, Calder's mother, had looked as though she understood. She had hugged both of them, Bliss and Calder, goodbye, and told them to be safe. That last part she only said to Calder, and I was like, yeah, saying be safe to Bliss just feels sort of pointless on a number of different levels. And I really do appreciate how Calder isn't sure whether his people are coming with him. And Foster is just like, dude, look how far we have come together. Do you think we're turning around now? And his eyes water and he just says, humid today. That's twice we moved you to tears recently, Andal pointed out. I hope this leads to some kind of raise. I left a lucrative position to save your life. I love these guys. They're delightful. Bliss clung to the ropes of the Testament, watched the ships around her, and wondered why she was in such a bad mood. She didn't like moods in general. Involuntarily changing her emotional state felt too much like something Tharlos would do. Yo. Hard relate, Bliss. Hard relate. As somebody who felt the moment they slipped into like kind of a depressive episode in the middle of the night last night. I woke up from a bad dream and could not sleep, and I felt it just like happening, and I was like, God damn it. And knowing that there's kind of nothing you can do, you just have to ride it out. It sucks, and that's not even just a mood. But anyway, all in all, just trying to say, you're not wrong. It's bullshit. It's just total bullshit. And she's thinking about how part of her mood is from hearing that Calder is basically preparing to sacrifice himself. And she's like, why am I so upset about this? And she realizes that, of course, part of her has grown to like care about him a little. The fact that he also isn't really like sure it's going to work, and she doesn't think it's going to work. So the idea that he would sacrifice himself for something that's unlikely to even be successful is rankling. And then the fact that everybody else is like so willing to go ahead with this because they don't value Calder at all. So of course for them, it's just like, yeah, all right, we'll try that. And she's just kind of disgusted by it. And she's thinking like, look, I know we keep thinking we're somehow managing to catch Kellerak off guard. I don't buy it. He knows what's happening. And like, he probably even wants this to happen. I don't think we're catching this guy with his pants down. It's not going to happen. So she didn't like when other people had plans for her that she didn't understand. That reminded her of the elders. The consultants had passed her a note before she left. It had contained precise instructions detailing a time and location that she should check if she wanted revenge on Nathaniel Barrius. The location was a longboat drifting alone at the back of the fleet, and the time was... She reached into her coat and found that the spear had turned her pocket watch into a small wheel of cheese. She checked it anyway. The current time was etched into its soft surface. So she decides she's going to go for it, even though she's like, is this a trap? I don't know. I'm just going to do it. Let's go. And she jumps over there. A moment later, she was standing on the back of a small boat as a man in a rumpled suit panted and worked a pair of oars. His hair had once been tidy and slicked back. His glasses were askew, and his wiry arms trembled as they moved. Bliss felt her eyes go wide. It's all right, Barrius muttered to himself. Not so bad, is it? Made it out in one piece, regroup, rebuild, let the regents handle the elders. At least it's a nice day. And then he looks behind him and sees her there. And he tries to do, let's have a nice father-daughter chat. You're not my father. The weapon of yellowed bone was taller than she was, and as she swiveled it around to point at his chest, she could feel its joy at being unleashed. It was ready to change. You're my handbag. Before she transformed him forever, she allowed Nathaniel Barrius one last scream. And that is the end of chapter 22. Very, very satisfying. Good for you, Bliss. I'm so happy for you, girl. I love this for you. I want her to like not even use that handbag. Put it in a closet somewhere, wrap it in a little dust cover. Take it out every now and then when you're in a bad mood. Just lift your spirits looking at this handbag, knowing that this is like your mortal enemy. Love it. Yay. So yeah, the next episode is going to be the last 3 chapters. And, I know, I feel like Shara's book wrapped kind of abruptly. So I'm interested to see if I feel the same way about Calder's, because it just feels like there is so much left to do. And Shara's, it just really was a very sudden jump to, oh, she's a regent. And I was like, wait, what? And I am not sure what happens with Calder, because I don't even remember if it's mentioned in Shara's chapter what his deal is at this point. So I guess we'll see. I'm interested. Oh my God. Asher says, he's such a slimy fuck, infinitely better as a handbag. Maybe a white elephant gift. That would be hilarious to just like give it to somebody. Just like, oh, I don't really need this anymore to use it. Oh, that's funny. All right. I'm going to wrap, but thank you guys again very much for hanging out with me. Thank you to Asher for commissioning this episode. Appreciate you. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.